Howdy everyone, Oliver from the Whiskey List here. Welcome to tonight's entertainment. So, as hopefully you've all seen, tonight is the very first virtual whiskey show, American style. I'm your host for tonight, so we've got a fun program set ahead for everyone here. This is my absolute very first live stream, so I'm kind of a bit fresh to this, but keen for the game. American style, thank you Whiskey Pete for leveraging, letting me borrow your hat. Doing a proper cowboy style. So let's hopefully just waiting for a few more people to join the live stream. I've got about a couple dozen joining more and more per the second, so hopefully you can all hear me. Can you hear me? Just doing a final audio check and then we'll get started. Awesome. So, welcome to the very first virtual whiskey show, American style. I'm your host, Oliver Maruda. So, David, who runs Alchemist events, he's been busy getting the show, the tastings, the samples up and running, and he's basically asked me to join today to be the MC and to welcome our special guest, who's dialing in live from Kentucky. But first, just some intro points. I kind of wanted to, welcome 260 participants have received or will be receiving their samples. There's a bit of a delay with Australia Post with the current COVID situations, but hopefully they'll get sorted and you'll get your sample kit soon. This is a taste at your own pace. There's 42 samples from 24 brands. So let's just take a look at some of these brands. So we switch across here to the brand announcement. You can see, there's a whole bunch of American ryes, bourbons, single malts as well. We've got a couple Canadians, and we've got 3 Aussie ryes as well from Belgrove, Whippersnipper, and Archie Rose Rye, which recently won World Whiskey Awards Best Rye in the World. So congratulations to Dave Withers and the Archie Rose team over there for that win. So yeah, 24 brands, 42 samples, 260 packs were sent out. Each pack should have got a tasting glass as well, and obviously if you're watching the live stream, you'll be watching it through the Whiskey List app. So welcome everyone. I'm just going to kick into a very short video which kind of walks you through what's going to happen in terms of your tasting kits, the app, etc., and then we'll welcome our special guest.
Hi guys, I've brought my ticket for the virtual whiskey show American style. So I'm going to show you what you can expect when you get your pack in the mail. So let's unbox it and have a look inside. Okay, so this is the list of all the whiskies that we've got, 42 samples. And here they all are, that's pretty cool. Let's have a look at this one. So that's the Woodford Reserve malt. All right, let's try out some of these whiskies. There's a glass included. All right, let's give it a try. So now that we have all of our samples, it's time to get into the interactive app. Now instructions on how to download this app will be sent to you guys all very shortly. So let's check it out. So we've got the app here. I'm going to go into the app, navigate to the virtual whiskey show, enter event. Then you'll be able to browse whiskies via bottle or via brand. So let's say, go into whiskey here, you'll see there's lots of information about the type of whiskey, where it's from, the price, a bit of information about it. You can choose to rate the whiskey, and you can even buy it. So to sum up, For the virtual whiskey show American Style, you're going to get 42 great samples to try, a tasting glass, we have the interactive app. So the first time that we've done a virtual whiskey show ever, very excited for it coming up. We're looking forward to seeing you in late April. Cheers.
Thank you, Emma, for that wonderful demo. So, as you've just seen, 42 samples, tasting glass, and the app. Now, the app, couple important features in the app. Not only can you browse all the whiskies and watch videos that each of the brands have supplied, which include tasting notes and some information about the brands themselves. You can also rate your favourite whiskey. And most importantly, if there's any whiskies that you've tried tonight or throughout the week and you've really enjoyed them and you want to buy a bottle, just like the old school, the physical whiskey shows, we have an online bottle shop. That's always part of the experience. Try the whiskey and then buy the whiskey. So you can buy your whiskey inside the app. Just hit add to cart, go through the steps through checkout, and then you'll be sweet, and the bottle will arrive as soon as the posties get their act sorted. But thank you everyone for your support to date. Now we've got a very special guest from Kentucky coming on this evening. He's actually dialed in super early, it's about 6 a.m. there. But before we bring him on, I just want to play a quick introduction video. Each whiskey show always has a special whiskey that's associated with it. And the whiskey tonight has been bottled exclusively for the whiskey show, is a Woodford malt. So our guest is from Woodford Distillery, and this is just a quick video about Woodford, and then we'll bring in our special guests for a live Q&A panel as well.
The drive here, you come through the horse farms, through the rolling fields, down into this river valley here. You come to these beautiful old buildings. I mean, it's the best of Kentucky. And look around and say, wow, yeah, I get to work here. It's kind of cool.
Woodford Reserve is an authentic Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey made 100% in Kentucky by us.
Every step of the way, we are so focused on doing the best that it can be done. We work with local farmers to make sure that the grain that they are growing for us is top-notch.
I'm such a fan that I bought my own barrel of it.
We are very small. Every barrel that's on its way to become bourbon, I mean, I have a direct handprint on that. They all have my hammer marks on them. I helped make that. It's very delicious, high-end bourbon that if you haven't had, I would like to buy you a drink.
It's just happiness, it's enjoyment, it's relief, it's all the above. I can't describe it, I just say, damn, this is good.
We are constantly innovating and we're constantly pushing the envelope, and that's what Woodford was built for. There's a lot of ways to consume bourbon. You can cook with it and have food pairings.
I like to take simple things and kind of elaborate on them, turning somebody on to something they've never had before. To me, that's rewarding.
Everybody is so excited to be part of Woodford Reserve. That tells you a lot about the brand.
It's something to easily be proud of.
Woodford Reserve has really captured the essence of Kentucky.
If it hadn't worked, it would have been crazy, but it works, it was visionary, right?
Alright, welcome back everyone. I'm just going to unmute Chris. I believe this is the right one. Okay. So Chris is unmuted. Chris Morris is the master distiller from Woodford Distillery, Woodford Reserve Distillery. He's been in the industry for over 40 years. He's the second master distiller, taking over in 2003 from master distiller Lincoln Henderson, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So yeah, please welcome everyone, Chris Morris.
Well, that's okay. But we were just talking about all the exciting whiskeys you have in front of you. Reserve. The industry was in decline. Historic distillers were closing. There was no Kentucky Bourbon Trail tourism attraction for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. But we changed all that. So we had acquired a long-abandoned distillery, the historic LeGros and Graham Distillery in Kentucky, and we restored it. And we not only restored it, but because it was a brownfield it was a ruin, we were able to put in the equipment and the processes we wanted to make a completely new whiskey, because we were making a whiskey for a new time. When you think about when Jack Daniels created Jack Daniels in the 1800s, he was making a whiskey for his local population. They didn't know tequila, they didn't know cognac, they didn't know vodka. When George Garber Brown created that Old Forester in 1870, he was making bourbon for a local audience. He had never heard of Zinfandel or Syrah from Australia. He made bourbon for bourbon drinkers. But as we're introducing Woodford Reserve in the 1990s, we're making a whiskey for the world, for a world that drinks all those various spirits, beers, and wine. So the thought was this bourbon had to have the flavors of the world in it. It had to have those sweet notes that anyone who likes the sweet characteristics of a rum or a cachaça or a sweet wine enjoy. We had to have the grain notes that a malt drinker would like, a bourbon drinker would like. We have to have the spice of a Syrah, the Zinfandel, of any kind of spicy whiskey. We had to have the fruit and floral notes that wine drinkers and cognac drinkers appreciate. And we had to have the wood notes that any spirit, beer, or wine that spends time in oak, people enjoy. So that led to the 5 sources of whiskey flavor process. How do these flavors come to life? So we came up with a grain recipe for our Woodford Reserve bourbon, which was our initial launch, that was very balanced, enough rye for spice, enough malt for nutty grain notes, enough corn for sweetness. We had created a unique strain of yeast, the Woodford Reserve yeast, which is used only for us, by us. And this yeast ferments for the longest period of time in the industry. We'll ferment our mash, our grain and water combination, for 7 days, and that produces fruit esters. We're using this unique limestone water. We have about the best limestone water in Kentucky because Woodford Reserve is the one distillery in the heart of the inner bluegrass region of Kentucky where the limestone is the thickest, and that minerality gives certain characteristics to Woodford. Then, as you see on the video, we brought in pot stills from Scotland in a triple distillation set. Only Auchentoshan was a triple distilled single malt. We borrowed that Scottish, Irish style of distilling and brought it back to the United States, where it would have been used in the 1800s to create this wonderful spirit. And then we go into the wood, and we make our own barrels, and our barrels are made, therefore, uniquely for us. And we introduced wine toasting to the whiskey barrel industry. We toast our barrels like they're going to hold a great wine, and then we char them as is required and as traditional for Kentucky bourbon for additional sweet aromatic notes. So when you add all 5 of those areas of flavor together, you get the most complex and balanced bourbon, which is Woodford Reserve, all focused on flavor. And that's the key, Oliver, balance. If you're balanced, you're not going to throw anybody off. So if you like a spicy spirit, Woodford Reserve is going to be just spicy enough. If you don't like a spicy drink, Woodford Reserve won't be too spicy because the flavors are in balance. So that has led us on to our journey of flavor. And that's why we have the Distiller's Select Range, which is our bourbon, our rye, our malt, and our wheat whiskeys. Not a wheated bourbon, but a wheat whiskey. Each of those 3 additional family members plays a role in the flavor presentation. The bourbon is balanced, so the rye is out of balance. It's a spicy whiskey, but it's spicy in the Woodford Reserve style. It still has fruit, sweet, grain, and wood characters. Very, very complex, but it's spicy. Our wheat, which is 51% of the recipe, 52% actually, is going to be a softer whiskey, and the fruit notes shine through. The malt that we're going to talk about today is, of course, a malt whiskey, and it's going to have the grain-forward character. And last but not least, double oaked. Double oaked is all about the sweet aromatics. So each one of our whiskeys highlights one of the 5 areas of flavor on our flavor wheel, with Woodford Reserve bourbon having a balance presentation of flavor. So this malt, you think, is really special. Now, you referenced single malts earlier. This is not a single malt. And single malts are becoming quite a phenomenon across the world. I remember one of the first single malts made outside of Scotland or Ireland was Mara, the Swedish malt whiskey. And Sweden makes whiskey, and of course it's a wonderful drink. And you have single malts being made in your all's part of the world, in Japan, in France, in Germany. They're being made everywhere, single malts, because single malt Scotch has set such a high standard or bar for excellence. Well, this is not a single malt. We made a single malt and released it in our Masters collection over 10 years ago. We made the first single malt whiskey in the history of Kentucky. And that was a complete over the top of everybody's head. They never realized that because Kentuckians don't drink a lot of malt whiskey. So we did make the first single malt in Kentucky's history and learned a lot from it. And what I learned, that a single malt, specifically one that has no peat character, because we don't have any peat in Kentucky, we don't smoke our whiskeys, it was sort of boring, sort of bland. And that wasn't up to snuff for us. It had to be more. So I started doing research, and a couple of research topics brought us to this whiskey. Number one, in 1935, when the U.S. government, as we were coming out of Prohibition after repeal in 1933, and all the rules and regulations that govern the beverage alcohol industry in America were being laid down and codified, the federal government of the United States told the distillers you can make 4 straight whiskeys. These are the 4 approved straight whiskey types: straight bourbon, straight rye, straight malt, straight wheat. And of course, all the Kentucky distillers who had opened back up said, well, we're making bourbon, that's what we know how to do. And over in Virginia and Pennsylvania and up and down the eastern seaboard and Maryland, they go, well, we're going to make rye whiskey because that's what we know what to do. And it seems nobody made wheat and nobody made malt whiskey. So the return or the introduction of those 2 types of whiskey is a very recent trend, mainly among the micro or craft distilleries. So I saw that as, those are the original 4 straight whiskeys. We can adapt them to play a flavor role. And then further research I just thought was terrific. In Woodford County, in the heart of Kentucky, is where the first malting operation was established in Kentucky. The first malting operation established west of the Appalachian Mountains. And where was it? Right in Woodford County. 1785, the first maltings west of the Appalachians, right down the road from our distillery. Of course, it's long gone now, but I said, oh my gosh, Woodford County had a malting. And then further research, and I've seen these old maps for years, and these are engineering and architectural maps of the original Brown-Forman distillery, our parent distillery. The original distillery was the only distillery in Kentucky out of over 200 distilleries that had a floor malting and a malt kiln like a Scottish distillery, right in Kentucky. Never paid any attention to it because I wasn't looking for it. And that said, my gosh, if any whiskey has the historic right, the historic provenance to make a Kentucky straight malt whiskey, it's Brown-Forman's Woodford Reserve. And that's what we did. But again, I adjusted the recipe because it had to fit into our flavor story. It can't just be mono-specific. It just can't be malt, which again, I thought was rather boring. That's not a comment on any other whiskeys. I thought ours was boring. So this is not a single malt. It is 51% malt, 37% corn. It's a Kentucky whiskey, and 2% rye. So there's a 3-grain mash bill in this. The same mash bill that is in our rye, the same mash bill that is in our bourbon, corn, rye, and malt. But we just changed the ratios. Nothing else changes. This is the same water, yeast, fermentation, distillation, and maturation as our bourbon, rye, and our new wheat whiskey. So they're all the same, except the flavor. The flavor is so different. So if anyone has a glass, hopefully your kids came to you, whiskey in existence. It's not often you get to taste a unique whiskey, one of a kind. So, beautiful color. It's been aged in our new barrels. We use them once only, so it has bourbon-like color, all natural. And the nose is all about the malt, initially. And our malt is not smoked, as we said. It's not peated. So it's very sweet, very clean, very dry. And it allows more of the corn and that little hint of rye spice to shine through. So this is soft and sweet, but it certainly has a lot of other characteristics. So let's go ahead and take our first sip of Woodford Reserve Kentucky Straight Malt.
I jumped ahead, Chris, and I tried it a little bit earlier. I couldn't wait. It's delicious.
You're a good man, good man. All right. And this is 45% ABV, so it's a nice standard presentation for us, but it seems so soft. A lot of people don't think it's going to be as high an ABV as it is. Now, as you taste, you'll know it's fruit because of our long fermentation and our unique yeast strain, but the fruit becomes more tropical and stone fruit. This morning for me, again, this morning, I'm getting some nice peach notes, some apricot notes. Man, a lot of sweetness. The spice. It's just a bit there. It's a famous little hint of mint, cinnamon, very delicate. And then the malt is milk chocolate, malty, cocoa, little dark chocolate around the edges, a Nutello. And you can find some soft nut notes like a hazelnut in here as well, toasted nuts. So we've been having a lot of fun with this. And as you said, this is very special for Australia. We started making this, of course, a number of years ago, and we cannot make a lot of it because our job is to make bourbon first, to make Woodford Reserve bourbon, which of course allows us to make double oaked. And then our third priority is Woodford Reserve rye. The malt and the wheat and the Master's Collection and our other specialty whiskeys are produced in limited amounts, very few days a year, because there's just not enough days in the year and not enough capacity to make all we want. So there's not much malt for the world. We're producing it. It's a standard SKU. It's a member of the family. It's not going away, but there'll never be a lot of it. So when you do find some, buy it because it is very hard to find.
No, that's some wonderful tips, and thank you. I've people can't see my face, but I've put up the flavor wheel next to you, so as you've been talking through those tasting notes, people have been able to reference the flavor wheel. But yeah, it's a delicious. The spices there. It's first sip is a little bit oily, it coats your kind of your palate, your mouth, but then going back for more, the heat is there. It's very welcoming. I'm just taking the time to kind of enjoy it.
And what's fun with the whiskey world today is before the pandemic, these few bars that were getting malt in the United States, bartenders were rushing to create cocktails with Woodford Reserve malt as they do with wheat, rye, and bourbon. So it's just not for aficionados like ourselves who want to drink their whiskey neat or maybe with a little bit of water or ice. There are actually people making cocktails with Reserve malt. So you never know what's going to happen in today's world of whiskey.
Oh, this would make a killer old fashioned. That's something I'm going to definitely try probably tomorrow. Thank you for kind of taking us through a little bit about Woodford and this malt especially, as well as the rest of the core range. Do you have a little bit of time? We can I see some questions are starting to filter through. If we can start the Q&A session.
Oh, sure.
So first question, and this one just from myself. How did you land on? I think 53% malt, 33% rye, and 14% corn. How's that recipe come about?
Well, everything again is based on flavor and also certain nutrient levels that yeast need. Our yeast requires some rye, so it sounds counterintuitive to put rye in a wheat whiskey or in a malt whiskey, for example, because it is a spice note. So it's a flavor source, but also it's a required nutrient. Our yeast needs some of the material in the rye to go about its life, which of course is producing flavor for us. So we're going to look at having for example, our wheat whiskey is 8% rye, corn, malt, and wheat. So the grains do play more than just a flavor role. Most people don't realize that. It also has a nutrient aspect of it. So I'll work with the recipe based on knowing I have to have certain amounts of grain, 2% the minimum for the rye, and then how does it impact the flavor? In this case, very little rye was needed, and we used the least amount because we didn't want to overpowering the malt's character. The other aspect of rye usage and malt usage is the enzymic action. As you know, you have to convert starch to sugar for fermentation to occur. Now, if you're using a malt whiskey, a single malt in Scotland, they don't need to worry about enzymic action because the malting process has already converted starch into sugar. But in Kentucky, we've got corn, wheat, and rye whose sugars are so complex they can't ferment, and you need the malted barley enzymes to break those sugars down into fermentable resource. So, for example, 14% is going to convert that's going to be adequate for us to convert corn and wheat, etc. Wheat requires 20%. So there's also that catalytic conversion consideration as well. The malt that need a lot of rye or that need to worry about that because it's malt. There's plenty of malt in it, so we have plenty of malt to convert the corn and that little bit of rye to sugar.
Right, there's so much technicality to making such a wonderful glass of whiskey. We celebrate and thank you for people like you who take the time and effort to dedicate a whole career to making delicious malt. Thank you for that. But the next question is, I think I'm just going to read the one from the very bottom because it's just come in. It said, what did you say was hard to find again? Sorry, that's a quick question from John. I think you're talking about the limited quantities of this whiskey available in Australia.
Yep, it's not only limited in Australia, it's limited in the U.S. as well, and a few other export markets. So that's why I'm so excited that you all have some, because again, there are much of the United States doesn't have Woodford Reserve Kentucky Straight Malt. We've only allowed it in 18 markets because it is so limited.
Okay, well, hopefully, John, that answers your question. The next question is from Jason. How old is the Woodford aged for before it's being bottled in this particular malt?
Very good question, Jason. Well, we don't believe in age claims, and anything bottled in the United States that is over 4 years of age is not required to have an age claim. So obviously, with no age claims on a bottle of Woodford, you know it's a minimum of 4 years of age. But we are batching barrels together. In our inventory, we have barrels that we put away yesterday, so they're 1 day old. And the oldest barrels I have in our inventory are 17 years of age. Now, there's not many of those, of course. But what we're doing is batching barrels of flavor presentation. Because even though a barrel is a barrel of malt or a barrel of bourbon, it'll taste different because of the time of year it was produced, because how the wood was running to the cooperage. The wood's coming from different wood sources. It's Ozark oak or Appalachian oak or Northern oak. It's all the same species, but the terroir, its source will vary. So in other words, every single barrel can have its own personality. And we need our whiskeys to be consistent in flavor. So we
makes a lot of sense, and it's interesting. Every country in the world that makes its own version of whiskey has got slightly different regulations. Australia is minimum 2 years in oak. In Scotland, it's 3 years. So it's age is a very interesting topic. But hopefully that answered Jason's question. Next question is from Michael. He says, "Hi Chris, great to see the malt version make it to Australia. Will the wheat version make it down under as well?"
Oh, I'm sure it will. That was just released this past summer, so it's very, very new. The malt we released 2 years ago, and unfortunately, are just the way things. I see through the distribution chain, Australia usually gets our releases about a year in, so you're behind the lag on the wheats. But the wheat, again, is very new. It's, again, limited in the U.S. like the malt. So it eventually will end up in your hands. And it's a beautiful whiskey as well. It's got a red label on it. The malt has the blue, the green for the rye, and of course our parchment for the bourbon. So it's been a lot of fun. And even though there are a number of wheat whiskeys on the market, some of the pundits and some of the competitions have said we've really helped create the wheat category with the release of Woodford wheat. So we're very proud of it.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it as well, and when it finally lands here as well, it's going to be an exciting whiskey to try. The next question is anonymous. Has said, "Hi Chris, why do you not age in tequila casks?"
I'm sorry to laugh. I've never been asked that question before. Well, number one, tequila cask would have been used to make or age tequila in, so it's a used barrel. If you mean a barrel that actually held tequila, we cannot use oak for making our straight whiskeys. Now, in terms of finishing, like putting Woodford Reserve as we have in Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Cognac, as we've been finishing Woodford Reserve in our Masters collection. I've actually tried cognac barrels. I've actually tried tequila barrels, and I was not pleased with the result, because our finishing philosophy is, and it's been put to paper after the tequila. So this tequila I put Woodford in tequila, oh gosh, 12, 15 years ago. It's been a long time. And you learn, especially when you're a new distillery and a new brand, you have to learn and make your own way. And as we've developed Woodford, I've been setting rules and regulations, philosophy, rationale, a distillery charter to guide future generations on how we're going to continue to make Woodford Reserve when I'm long gone. So our finishing philosophy is Woodford Reserve is a very complex whiskey. Every bottle of that beautiful bourbon that Oliver picked up has approximately 250 flavor compounds in it. My gosh, that flavor wheel illustrates just the more prominent ones. If you put all the flavors of Woodford on that flavor wheel, you couldn't read the darn thing. It'd just be type on top of type. So Woodford Reserve is so complex, we don't need to add new flavor to it. So when we finish Woodford in a second barrel, a used barrel, that barrel is not to add a new flavor to Woodford. It's to highlight existing flavor. For example, our Pinot Noir finish. The Pinot Noir barrels we used, which were French oak and been used for years in a California Pinot Noir, that Pinot Noir's flavor notes were dried cranberry, dried cherry, and dark chocolate and black pepper. All of those are on our flavor wheel. So they were highlighted. So no additional flavor was added. So tequila has flavors in it that Woodford Reserve does not. So that doesn't fit our philosophy because it adds flavors that we don't have. And that disrupts the complexity of balance. So that's why we won't use a tequila barrel. We don't have those herbaceous agave notes such as celery and jicama. We don't have them. So it's just not going to work for us.
Yeah, well, that that makes a lot of sense. On the topic of barrels, Steve has just sent in a question. Are the barrels used toasted or charred methods, and how much does the way the barrels are prepared adding to the flavour?
Well, the barrel for Woodford is, again, a key component, as all 5 sources of flavor are. So what we're doing is seasoning our oak, and the oak must dry naturally out of doors for a minimum of 9 months, including the summer season in that 9 months. Then the barrel body is crafted and then toasted, and toasted like a wine barrel. In other words, the wood's not burning, but it's being subjected to intense heat for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And that's going to set up massive amounts of vanilla character. All natural oak lignin broken down at specific temperatures. And then the barrel body will go into the char tunnel. This occurs minutes and minutes later. And the barrel interior is set afire. And now we're talking triple the temperature of the toasting process. Of course, the wood is actually burning. And at that temperature, hemicellulose converts into the sugars it's composed of, and they caramelize inside the remaining cellulose material. And that's going to give us the butterscotch and the chocolate, the caramel, and all these intense sweet aromatic notes, which when they combine with vanilla notes gives us another range of character. So we char for 25 seconds. So 10-minute toast, 25-second char, 9-month seasoning. So you can see it takes from a long time to a shorter and then a short time to make the flavors our barrels need. But again, we made the first toasted and charred barrel in the history of whiskey. And that was again by design.
That's how do you even come up with an idea like that?
Well, sometimes you have to look around the world and borrow things. And we had a cooperage in California, in Mendocino County, and we made wine barrels because Brown-Forman has a wine business. We used to have a big wine business. We have scaled back now. But we were making wine barrels. And what do you do with wine barrels? Some you toast, some you don't toast, depends on what the winemaker wants. So we had learned about toasting barrels while we were in the wine business. There's some really good things in those toasted barrels. Let's try doing them for a whiskey barrel, for a bourbon barrel, because again we have to add the char. And we did it. It took some experimentation, but we developed this unique barrel, and Woodford Reserve was what it was intended for.
I love how the industries all interconnect. Nothing is wasted. Everyone shares. A lot of really good Australian whiskey is made using ex-bourbon casks from Jack Daniels and Woodford. So, once you guys are done with the barrels, they get shipped over here and they make really good bourbon casks for making Aussie single malts as well. So thank you for having the laws to only use it once. Means we get to leverage the products too. The next question. I like this question. What's in the future for Woodford Reserve? What are you most excited about?
Well, one product that we're so excited about, and again, COVID has disrupted its rollout across the world, across the United States, is our Woodford Reserve Baccarat. That is our luxury version of Woodford Reserve. Again, very limited. And of course, your listeners and club members are going to be familiar with some of the fine single malts and fine cognacs that are presented in these elegant Baccarat crystal decanters. And we, many years ago, started working on a project called Project Lafayette, after the Marquis de Lafayette, of finishing Woodford Reserve again in a complementary flavor barrel cognac cask. XO cognac casks, and a good long finish, 3 and 4 year finishes. And we were going to have a beautiful, unique bottle out of glass produced for us. Well, as you said, this international grapevine, because we had these barrels on display at the distillery and people coming through for a tour, and then what are those big barrels? Well, those are French cognac barrels that were finishing Woodford Reserve. And word got back to France, and Baccarat approached us and said, you have such a good reputation, your package is so elegant, would you like to have the first Baccarat presentation ever for an American whiskey? We said, of course. So Woodford Reserve Baccarat has been in global travel retail duty-free for the last year, and it's done extremely well. And we're planning now to be rolling it out in other markets, including Derby Day, original Derby Day, this May 2nd, this Saturday. We would be introducing to a national audience via television Woodford Reserve Baccarat. Not happening, of course, but I can't wait for it to get to Australia. It's an elegant presentation. The cognac finished Woodford is just gorgeous, and it's expensive. It's expensive, but it's worth it. In the bottle, you'll have a lifelong keepsake with that crystal decanter.
Yeah, we've heard about the Baccarat. We can't wait to hear that it hopefully one day comes down under as well, so we can have a few sips of that one. That one sounds super interesting. Another question that I had for you was, how do you every day? Are your days the same? Do you mix up your days? I imagine the role of a master distiller is so diverse, and different challenges appear. Like, what's a typical day look like for you?
Oh yes, I guess a typical day doesn't exist, which I guess makes it a typical day. So we have a lot of activities going on, of course, but the paramount for me is the barrel tasting and batching. Yeah, that's the core of the product, getting it in the bottle for us to enjoy here together, and you in Australia, here in Kentucky. So putting together the batches, tasting barrels, obviously walking through the distillery, seeing how things are running. We do have to judge and rate the new spirit coming off the stills, make sure it's of quality before it goes into the barrel. I do go to the cooperage, see how barrel production is going, if we have some experimentations, a lot of innovation, a lot of R&D work, and hosting VIPs like yourself. You guys come to Woodford, we'll spend some time together and have a drink, maybe a bit of lunch, and also training. Now as a senior at the distillery, I'm responsible for training the next generation, and I've got a wonderful assistant master distiller I'm training to succeed me when I retire, and that's Elizabeth McCall. She's been to Australia this past couple of years. I was coming, but she went instead. She was a lucky one. So a lot of work in teaching the next generation how to craft our great whiskey. So it's a good day, whatever the day is at Woodford.
No, it sounds everyone's got their own jobs and challenges and stuff, and then yeah, I imagine the role of a master distiller. There are testing days as well as good days, and when you launch products like the one we're trying today, it all makes it worthwhile, right?
Oh, it is. I mean, the best job in the world, as you know, Tolliver, has its downside. It's still a job, but if we're fortunate to be able to work in an industry and a profession that you love, you can't ask for more than that.
Great. I'm just conscious of time, so I think we've got time for 2 more questions. Next one is, John asks, again, the maple barrel cask, which Woodford Reserve is that, because that sounds amazing?
That was one of our Masters Collection releases, maple wood finish. And again, that's this innovation I like to do, having your own cooperage. I called the team in, I said, I want to explore making barrels from other hardwoods. They have to be native to Kentucky. Obviously, they have to hold liquid. And we want to see what the flavors they give Woodford Reserve. And we have Bob Russell is our forester. He's a PhD, so he says, well, this tree has this and this tree has that. You can't use that tree, this tree. So anyway, we made a bunch of barrels out of various hardwoods: maple, pecan, hickory, beech, birch, cherry,
try that now. Now that I've heard all about it, I'm looking around the table and I'm like, where is the maple?
If you can find it, you're lucky, because again, that was so long ago and so little of it.
All right, our very last question. Chris asks, what do you think about a barrel-proof double oaked just for Australia?
Oh gosh. Well, I've learned to never say never. We'll see. Good ideas come from many places.
Yeah, I would love that as well. Thank you, Chris. Let's maybe we can make it happen. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's super early over there. And you've got a busy week ahead, as well on the weekend. Thank you for taking the time to walk us through a bit about the distillery, the core range, this amazing bottle that I'm just been sipping on while you've been talking. The Kentucky Straight Malt Whiskey from Woodford Reserve, 45.2%. Batch 1 on the label is what I'm making sure I point out the camera.
All right.
But, yeah, Chris Morris, the Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve Distillery. Thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to give you a little cheers here. I hope you like my hat as well. I tried to be as Kentucky as possible.
Well, thank you, Oliver, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
No worries. Well, have a wonderful night, and hopefully we'll next time once all this COVID finishes up, we can pop over to the States and visit the distillery as well.
We look forward to it. Hope you all can make it soon.
And you are always welcome down under, which I think we're hoping to get you down for a show, but yeah, well, one day.
Let's count on it. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. All right, just gonna switch back to me and Chris again. All right, that is Chris Morris, Master Distiller at Woodford Reserve Distillery, who just spent the last almost hour chatting everything about Woodford, answering your questions. Thank you for everyone who's sent through the questions. Apologies I couldn't get to all of them. We were kind of under a strict schedule tonight. Yeah, that's kind of it in terms of the event. 42 whiskey samples, 24 brands, one tasting glass, an app, rate the whiskies, watch the videos, and buy the ones that you like. As every year, there are some special distillery prices in the app, just like there are in the normal shows. So if there's a whiskey that you enjoy and you want to buy it, don't forget to buy it. It supports us in the show, and then we can keep putting these on. I think David from Alchemist, he hasn't increased his prices from the shows for 3 years now. They've remained the same. So for him to put on 42 samples at prices where you guys get to try such a range and diversity of whiskies from all around the world is amazing. And I thank David and his Alchemist team for putting on such a wonderful show. I'm just a simple host putting on a live stream in these uncertain times. So hopefully from the comfort of everyone's living room, and we can enjoy some whiskies, take some photos, post up your reviews online, take some time to enjoy the whiskies. David is just saying $89.98. Is the cost of the show.
No, the malt.
Oh, the malt. $89.99 is the cost of the malt, and it's in the app as well to buy. So if you want to grab it, grab it. There's limited stock available. It will most no doubt sell out. Thank you. Yeah, if there's any questions about the app or any issues, you can always hit up the Whiskey Show Facebook page or Instagram or the Whiskey List, where Chris and myself are on hand. We'll try and sort out any app issues. Again, thanks again to wonderful friend Pete Stevens from the Gentleman's Cabinet for letting me borrow this wonderful prop. And yeah, tell us, jump online on the socials and tell us, what are your favourite whiskies? Which one did you enjoy? Was it this wonderful malt? Was it some of the Aussies or the Canadians as well? Let us know what you think. And yeah, take the time to enjoy the whiskey. Last question, David. How long are the prices staying in the app for? 2 weeks. 2 weeks, guys. So you've got 2 weeks to kind of, taste at your own pace. you know, savor the flavors, rate the ones that you want, and then when you're ready, you've got 2 weeks to kind of, you know, make your purchases. But obviously the more popular ones may sell out first. So I think when we announced the app last night, about 2 hours later, one person bought 5 bottles straight away. I don't think he even had his tasting kit yet. He just said, you know, these prices are great and I wanted these whiskeys, so bought them straight away. Thank you so much. You know who you are. And then, yeah, any questions, send them through on the social media. Please enjoy the tasting kit again. And thank you for, you know, joining our very first live stream. In about 2.5 weeks' time, the 16th of May, we've also got the single malt whiskey show coming up. So I know a number of people bought tickets for that one as well. So it'll be very similar format. Jump into the app, see the whiskies, but they will be focused on the single malt. So this one's all about American and Canadians and a few Aussie ryes as well. So please take the time, enjoy it. Thanks again, and we'll no doubt see you very soon. Cheers.